Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWAS. We are continuing on with Wildcard Weekend. I'm recording this before Saturday's game, so hopefully by the time you're watching this, things went well for us in the two games on Saturday. Did hit Ohio State in the under last night, so that was cool. Nice little Friday night. So yeah, hopefully we had a good Saturday by the time you're watching. Got three games here lined up for Sunday. Going to go through all three of them in this video. Let's go.
Welcome to the SWAS.
All right, first up, we got Denver on the road in Buffalo. The Bills are laying 8.5, pretty much 8.5 across the board. Total sitting at 47.5. I do see a couple 48s out there. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action is coming in on the Buffalo side. Over 60% of the tickets, about 55% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with injury reports. And I got some good news across the board here. Both of these teams fully healthy. We got no injuries on the Denver offense, no injuries on the Denver defense, no injuries on the Buffalo offense, and no injuries on the Buffalo defense. We got an 18-week season here. We're into the playoffs, and these two teams at full strength. You love to see it. But anyway, let's talk about the matchup between the Broncos offense against the Bills defense. And on paper, this is pretty even. Denver offensively, 18th in yards per play, 18th in success rate. The Bills defense, 18th in yards per play allowed, 18th in success rate. So again, dead even on paper here between these two units. Bo Nix and the Denver passing attack coming into this one on a bit of a heater. Weeks 12 through 15, it was looking a little shaky. 6.3 yards per attempt, 73.9 average passer rating. That was against the Raiders, the Browns, and the Colts. But last three games, 8 yards per attempt, pass rating over 124, success rate over 63% per dropback, over 267 yards per game. Looking pretty excellent here coming into this one with some momentum. That being said, I mean, we're talking about the Bengals defense, which is obviously terrible and injured. The Chiefs defense that sat, I believe, their five main pieces playing a meaningless game. The Chargers one is impressive, but they blew that lead in the second half. So obviously there are things to consider when we're looking at these numbers, but it is nice to see Denver's passing attack pretty much playing its best football right now heading into the playoffs. And also they've been running the ball better. In those same last three games, 4.4 yards per carry, over 130 rushing yards per game, 37.3% success rate per rush isn't that great. Again, we're talking about the Bengals' terrible defense and the Chiefs' defense pretty much sitting everybody, but still, they've been running the football in the last few games, and that could come in handy in this one because Buffalo has struggled against the run. Check this out. In their last 5 home games, they're allowing over 4.9 yards per carry, over 45% success rate per rush, 123.8 rushing yards per game. Bills struggling to stop the run at home, and that's not new. The weakness of this Bills defense last year was stopping the run as well. Buffalo's defense is obviously great, but defending the run has been and still is the weakness of this defense. You look at the matchup on the line of scrimmage. I mean, Denver's offensive line, 12th in adjusted line yards, 10th in run blocking grade, 21st in yards before contact. The Bills' defensive front, 5th, 27th, and 25th. So the Broncos very well may be able to generate some push here and run the football. Not that the Broncos' rushing attack is anything crazy, but I don't think it's out of the question that the Broncos are able to come into this one and run the football a little bit on Buffalo. Some more good news for the Broncos offense is this pass protection's been one of the best in the NFL all season. In fact, it might be the best in the NFL. They're second in pressure rate allowed, first in pass blocking grade, second in adjusted sack rate. This is a Bills defense that's anchored by its pass. I mean, the pass rush is one of the most important aspects of this Buffalo defense. And Bo Nix is starting to really handle himself under pressure. I know if you look at these season-long numbers, they don't look great. I mean, 25th in yards per attempt, 30th in passer rating, but they were way worse than that. He's doing a much better job handling himself under pressure. And look at the bottom left, pressure to sack rate, 13.3%. 8th in turnover-worthy play rate under pressure. So you got a Buffalo Bills defense that's reliant on its pass rush against Bo Nix, who under pressure doesn't take sacks, doesn't turn the ball over. That's a solid combination there. If you're trying to back the Broncos offense or trying to back Bo Nix here, doesn't put the ball in harm's way, doesn't take sacks. You love to see it, especially from a rookie. And another thing, look at the top right of this graphic, blitz rate. Buffalo does not blitz much, 26th in the NFL in blitz rate. The reason I'm bringing that up, Bo Nix has actually been much better when not blitzed. 10th in completion percentage, 28th in yards per attempt, 21st in pass rating when not blitzed. He's actually struggled with the blitz this year. 35th, 34th, and 24th when blitzed. So this is starting to look like a pretty good matchup for Bo Nix. And when you take a look at the coverages, it actually gets better. Buffalo runs a lot of zone coverage, a lot of cover 2. They're 8th in zone coverage frequency, 8th in cover 2 frequency. Bo Nix has been better against zone coverage this year, 22nd in completion percentage, 34th in yards per attempt, 22nd in passer rating, compared to 35th, 19th, and 28th against man. So he has been better against zone coverage, and he's actually been pretty good against cover 2 this year, 16th, 15th, and 24th. So Bo Nix, better numbers against zone coverage, and actually pretty decent looking numbers against cover 2. This is starting to look like a good matchup for Bo Nix. That being said, there are a couple things that concern me here for the Broncos passing attack. Number one being this one right here. Buffalo's good at limiting the big plays downfield. They're 8th in DVOA against the deep pass. They're vulnerable to the short passes. They sit back in coverage. They'll sit back in cover 2 and give you those underneath throws. Bo Nix likes to throw the ball downfield. 12.9% of his passes are considered deep passes, and he's got a 103.3 passer rating throwing those deep passes. So that's actually been Bo Nix's most efficient passing depth, is throwing the ball downfield. His numbers don't look as good throwing those underneath throws, so I don't like that for Bo Nix. And also, we're talking about a road game in Buffalo in January in the playoffs against this Bills defense, a Bills defense that's been much better at home all season. On the road this year, they're allowing 25.2 points per game, 6.5 yards per play. At home, just 17.6 points per game, 5.5 yards per play. I will say the success rate is pretty close, though, indicating it hasn't been this much of a discrepancy. But still, this Buffalo defense does tend to play better at home. And also, look at their numbers against the pass at home. They're allowing just 194 passing yards per game in their home games in Buffalo, 5.9 yards per attempt. That being said, if you look at their schedule, how many elite passing attacks did they see? I mean, the Cardinals, the Jags, the Titans, the Dolphins with Tua, that's a decent one, but Tua played great in that game. If you remember, the Bills won 30-27. The Dolphins almost won that game. You got the Chiefs. They did do a good job against Mahomes. 49ers, Patriots, Jets. I mean, not a ton of dynamic passing attacks in there, so we do have to mention that. But no question, this Bills defense has been much tougher to throw on at home in Buffalo. So as a whole, on this side of the ball, I got to say, I like the matchup for the Broncos offensively. I think they will be able to run the ball a little bit against a Bills defense that's vulnerable to the run. One of the strengths of this Bills defense is the pass rush. You got a Denver offensive line that might have the best pass protection in the NFL. You got a quarterback in Bo Nix who protects the football and doesn't take sacks. I like that. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I think the Broncos are going to be able to move the football and score some points in this game. But before you go and grab one of those Denver plus 8.5s, Denver plus 9s, we got to look at the matchup on the other side. And this is where the value shifts back over to Buffalo. And if you're looking at this graphic, you might not see it. I mean, Denver's defense, 2nd in the NFL in yards per play allowed, 3rd in success rate. Buffalo's offense, 6th and 7th. So how is this an advantage for Buffalo? Well, matchup-wise, it's just starting to look pretty good. I mean, the Bills' run game seems to be rounding into form. Started off the season a little rocky. You probably didn't notice because Josh Allen was playing so well throwing the ball. But in weeks 1 through 7, 117 rushing yards per game, 4.5 yards per carry. Success rate per rush under 37%. Since week 8, the numbers look way better than that. So Buffalo's been very efficient running the football for a while now. Now, does that necessarily mean I think the Bills can run the ball in the Broncos' defensive front 7? I mean, not really, but if I'm being honest, I think they will be able to run it a little. In the last 3 games, the last 3 meaningful games, I should say, I'm not going to count the Kansas City game where the Chiefs rested everybody. Denver has been run on a little bit. I mean, Jonathan Taylor was definitely running the ball in that Colts game. In those last 3 meaningful games for the Broncos, 133 rushing yards allowed per game, 4.69 yards per carry. Now, the success rate still looks great, under 30%. So by no means am I saying this Broncos run defense isn't good. I'm just saying right now the Bills seem to be running the ball on everybody they see, and the Denver run defense is showing some vulnerabilities. So I don't think it's crazy to say that despite Denver having this elite run defense, and I'm not trying to take credit away from them, but I don't think it's crazy to say that the Bills are able to run the ball on them a little bit. I mean, generating push is going to be tough. This Broncos defensive front, 3rd in adjusted line yards, 11th in run defense grade, 1st in yards before contact. The Bills offensive line, 7th, 17th, and 16th. So again, I'm not saying the Bills are going to run the ball all over Denver, but I very seriously doubt this Denver defensive front is going to go into Buffalo and just shut the run game down. That doesn't sound realistic to me. Now let's talk about the matchup for Josh Allen, and if you plan on betting Buffalo, this is the moment you've been waiting for because this should be a very favorable matchup for Josh Allen. Number one, you got a Broncos pass rush. They blitz a lot. They get a lot of sacks. They're actually 1st in the NFL in adjusted sack rate. That's actually a positive angle for Buffalo because Josh Allen doesn't take sacks. He's got an 8% pressure to sack rate. That's so beyond good. You got a Denver defense that's reliant on getting the quarterback to the ground, and you got Josh Allen, a quarterback that doesn't take sacks. Now, the Denver pass rush can still rattle Josh Allen a little bit. I mean, 16th in passer rating under pressure, 24th in turnover-worthy play rate. So I'm not saying the Denver pass rush won't be a factor, but as a whole, this Denver defense is reliant on recording sacks. That's how they end a lot of their opponents' drives, is recording sacks. Going to be tough to record sacks in this one against Josh Allen. Nobody records sacks on Josh Allen. Also, I mentioned how the Broncos blitz a lot. They're 7th in the NFL in blitz rate. That's some more bad news for Denver because Josh Allen's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL when blitzed. 7th in passer rating. He's got 11 touchdowns, 1 interception when blitzed. 7.95 yards per pass attempt, which is 16th in the NFL. His passer rating drops to 18th when not blitzed. So he's actually better against the blitz. Now, one thing I do want to give to Denver's defense, I know their pressure rate is way down. You might have heard people talking about this. Since week 11, they're 29th in pressure rate compared to 10th in pressure rate in the first 10 weeks of the season. So you might look at this and think, the Denver pass rush hasn't been as effective. That's not exactly true. If you look at time to pressure, 2.41 seconds to pressure in weeks 1 through 10, it's 2.43. So it's not that the pass rush has been underperforming. It's that Broncos opponents have been prepping for the pass rush. They're coming into this game getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands fast. So this Broncos pass rush hasn't fallen off. Teams have just been preparing for it. That's all. This is still an effective pass rush. But unfortunately for Denver, that doesn't change the fact that Josh Allen and this Bills offense are a really tough matchup for this Broncos defense. Denver runs a lot of man coverage, 36.4% man coverage frequency, 5th most in the NFL. Josh Allen, shocker, better against man. 6th in the NFL in pass rating against man coverage. Against man coverage this year, he has 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Against zone coverage, 4 and 3. So he's been significantly better against man coverage. Another thing Denver's defense does a lot of is cover 1, 29% frequency, 7th most in the NFL. Josh Allen, solid looking numbers against cover 1, really nothing to take away there. Now, if you are looking to bet Denver, I guess you can point at this. The Broncos have been running a lot of cover 4, over 18% frequency since week 10, 3rd most in the NFL. Josh Allen does struggle against cover 4, so I guess that's something, but we're talking about 18% of the Broncos' defensive snaps, and most of those probably came in games where they had big leads and they were just sitting back in coverage. I very seriously doubt Denver's going to run a lot of cover 4 against Buffalo. Bills will just run the ball and average 5.5 yards per carry if Denver's going to try to run cover 4. So I don't expect to see a ton of cover 4 from the Broncos here. And one last thing we need to point out here with this Broncos defense, I don't want to use the word fraudulent because obviously this is a very good defense, but do we really think this is a top 3 defense in the NFL? They've done a lot of their damage against some really bad offenses. Check this out. In their games against passing attacks rated in the bottom 22 of the NFL, so basically passing attacks not in the top 10, the Broncos are allowing just 14.7 points per game, 5.3 yards per play, success rate under 40%. Great defensive numbers, elite defensive numbers against offenses that don't have a top 10 rated passing attack. In their games against offenses that do have a top 10 rated passing attack, they're allowing 27 points per game, 6.5 yards per play, success rate over 56%. So this elite Broncos defense really hasn't looked all that elite when they've played elite passing attacks, which the Bills definitely are. Look specifically at their numbers against the pass in those games against top 10 rated passing attacks. 8.3 yards per attempt, 64.3% success rate per dropback is crazy. An average opponent pass rating of 113, over 275 passing yards allowed per game. So again, this Broncos defense, not trying to take credit away, but you look at the full season numbers and it looks like this might be the best defense in the NFL. You take a closer look, I really don't think they're one of the best defenses in the NFL. Maybe a fringe top 10 defense, but it's kind of hard to unsee that every single time the Broncos defense sees a top 10 rated passing attack, they get thrown on violently. Now they're on the road against Josh Allen and the Bills offense. Josh Allen, a quarterback who never takes sacks. It's just a bad matchup, and in my opinion, Buffalo should be able to score points. I don't want to say easily, but I think the Bills are going to score some points in this game. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, I don't think I can lay the 8.5 because, like I said before, I think the Broncos are going to be able to run the ball. I think there's going to be opportunities for Bo Nix to make some plays. Why not just take an over? 47.5. This is the only wild card game this weekend that I don't have a bet on yet. It was this one in the Chargers-Texans game, but I since have put bets down on the Chargers-Texans game. I think I like the over here. 47.5. I think the Bills are going to score, so maybe a Bills team total over, but I think the Broncos can score some points too. So I lean towards Buffalo at the minus 8.5, but I am scared of that Broncos offense. I think they're going to be able to score, so give me the over. 47.5 over. Next game. Green Bay on the road in Philadelphia. The Eagles are laying 4.5 or 5. I'm actually seeing mostly 5s right now. There are a couple 4.5s out there. Total sitting at 45.5 pretty much across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in on the Philly side. 60% of the tickets, about 53% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some playoff trends here. It's been very profitable to bet on the Green Bay Packers as playoff underdogs. 9-3-1 against the spread as playoff underdogs since 2004. And Philadelphia is just 2-4 against the spread in their last 6 playoff games. They are 4-2 against the spread in their last 6 home playoff games, though. So there's some playoff trends for those of you looking for them. Let's get into the matchup. We'll start with the Green Bay offense against the Philadelphia defense. And we got a pretty good matchup on this side of the ball. Obviously, full season data. Got to give the edge to the Eagles here. They finished the season first in yards per play, first in success rate. Packers offense 5th and 14th. The story with this Eagles defense has been since the bye week, right? I mean, they started off the season. The defense didn't look all that great. They were struggling to get pressure on the quarterback. They have their bye week in week 5. Since then, it's been lockdown. Since their bye week in week 5, they're allowing just 15.9 points per game, 4.9 yards per play. They've probably been the best defense in the NFL since this moment at week 5. Here's the thing with that, though, and I don't want it to sound like I'm trying to poke holes in the Eagles defense. It's been great. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL. Hands down. I agree with that. We do have to point out, though, that since the bye week, if you isolate it to just their games against top 10 offenses, it hasn't been all that great. I mean, since the bye week, against bottom 22 offenses, they're allowing 12.1 points per game, 4.5 yards per play. Crazy defensive numbers on the left side of this graphic here. If you look at the right side, though, since the bye week against top 10 offenses, they are allowing 5.6 yards per play, 22 points per game, success rate over 46%. Look, by no means am I saying the Eagles defense is fraudulent, nothing like that. I'm just saying it's important to point out, we all look at this Eagles defense and we view them as flawless, right? Nobody can move the ball in this Eagles defense. Teams have moved the ball in this Eagles defense when they've seen good offenses, which has been kind of a rarity. And we're talking about a Green Bay Packers rushing attack that's right up there towards the top of the NFL in terms of most consistent, most dominant rushing attacks. Probably be the Eagles with Saquon Barkley, and then probably Baltimore with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Green Bay would be the next tier down. I mean, they're right there. Since week 8, they're averaging 4.7 yards per carry as a team, over 141 rushing yards per game, 44.7% success rate per rush. Nobody's been able to stop this Green Bay Packers run game. Also, this Packers offense, they love their zone runs. They're 3rd in the NFL in yards per carry, 8th in success rate when they utilize zone blocking schemes. Plays into the weakness of the Eagles defense. Against gap runs, they're 4th in yards per carry allowed, 3rd in success rate. Against zone runs, 18th and 30th. So I know everyone views this Eagles defense as impenetrable, right? Nobody can run the ball in this Eagles defense. Actually, we've seen a few teams run the ball in this Eagles defense. We saw the Cowboys do it in week 17 on the road in Philly, 4.2 yards per carry, over 43% success rate per rush, 127 yards on the ground in that game. Washington was able to run the ball on them a little bit in week 16. Success rate looks pretty terrible here, but they were able to do something on the ground. Rewind back to weeks 12 and 13. Both the Ravens and Rams were able to run the ball on the Eagles a little bit. 5.16 yards per carry, 129 yards per game in those two. And it's important to point these 4 games out. All of them happened after Brandon Graham got injured. He is out. He's on the IR. He's not playing in this game. He got injured in week 12. Since then, we've seen 4 games where teams were able to run the ball on the Eagles defense. And there may be a connection there. PFF has Brandon Graham as an 80.1. That's his run defense grade, 6th highest amongst his position. Since he's gotten hurt, the Eagles have played, I believe, 6 games. 4 of them, their opposition was able to run the ball on them a little bit. So the Green Bay Packers, one of the most consistent and dominant run games in the NFL, against an Eagles defense that, although it's elite, they have shown us they can be a little vulnerable to the run. I think the Packers are going to be able to run the football in this game. Now, when it comes to the matchup for Jordan Love throwing the ball in this Eagles defense, this is where I start to like the matchup for Philadelphia a little bit. But we'll start with a positive angle for Jordan Love. If you're betting Green Bay, you like this. Eagles do not blitz. 26th in the NFL in blitz rate. The reason that's significant is Jordan Love has really struggled with the blitz this year. 31st in completion percentage, 32nd in passer rating when blitzed. When not blitzed, he's 10th in the NFL in pass rating, 8th in yards per attempt. So the fact that the Eagles don't blitz much is definitely good news for Jordan Love. But after that, I gotta say, there are some things that worry me here for Jordan Love. Number one being the Eagles don't let you throw the ball downfield on them. They're the best defense in the NFL against the deep pass, the best defense in the NFL against the intermediate pass. Can't throw the ball downfield on this Eagles defense. You got to take those underneath throws, and Jordan Love Jordan Love loves to throw the ball downfield. 16.2% of his pass attempts are considered deep passes. That's such an important part of Jordan Love's game, are those explosive plays, those big downfield throws. Don't like that matchup. It's going to be tough for him to make those big plays against the Eagles secondary. And we have to keep in mind that this is an Eagles defense that already showed us they can give Jordan Love problems. They did it this year. It was week 1 in Brazil. So yes, it was 4 months ago on another continent in South America. But in that game, Jordan Love, 17 of 34, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, and 83 passer rating. Really wasn't that great in that game. And let's not act like shit is sweet when it comes to this Packers passing attack. In fact, the production's been down a little bit. In the last 3 games, just 202 passing yards per game, 7.1 yards per attempt, average pass rating of 91.7, 50.4% success rate per dropback is good. Not that these numbers are absolutely terrible, but look at them in comparison to the previous 3 games. Jordan Love was putting up elite numbers against Miami, Detroit, and Seattle. So even the Packers passing production as a whole has been a little down coming into this one.
I forgot to include that week 18 game against the Bears, Jordan Love only had like 12 pass attempts. Willis played a lot of that game. But still, the overall point I was making is that Jordan Love hasn't been playing his best in the last few games. That's still true, but I feel like I need to mention he didn't play that entire game against the Bears.
So I really do not know if we can count on Jordan Love consistently making throws on this Eagles defense. I was poking holes in the Eagles run defense because I think there are holes to be poked. But when it comes to the Eagles pass defense, I mean, they have my respect. Here are their game logs right here. I mean, look at the pass yards per attempt and the passer rating allowed column here. There's a lot of green. You got to go, I mean, all the way back to week 2 against the Falcons to find the last time there's some red. Nobody's really been able to throw the ball downfield on this Eagles defense. Probably the best pass defense in the NFL. So, I mean, I don't really like the matchup for Jordan Love. But like I said before, I do think they're able to hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs and have some success. I do think Green Bay can run the ball in this game. Now we get to the matchup on the other side, and we got the Eagles offense against the Packers defense. And raw data, you got to give the slight edge to Philadelphia here. Eagles offensively 11th and 13th. These numbers probably slightly skewed due to the Kenny Pickett games that were a disaster. Green Bay's defense 5th in yards per play, 19th in success rate. Obviously, when you're talking about the Eagles offense, I mean, the first thing you have to do is talk about Saquon Barkley and the rushing attack, right? I'm sure you've heard, if you own a smartphone, Saquon Barkley has 2,000 rushing yards on the year, didn't even play the last game of the season, averaged 5.8 yards per carry this year. So Philadelphia is just going to hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley and cruise control up and down the field on this one, right? Well, hold on. We have to point out that Green Bay has been on an absolute scorcher when it comes to stopping the run. I mean, you can make the argument, and I'm not saying this, I'm just saying you can make the argument that since week 12, Green Bay's been the best run defense in the NFL. Check this out. We're talking about a 7-game sample here, so this is not like 1 or 2 games. In the last 7 games of the season, Green Bay was allowing 71 rushing yards per game, 3.36 yards per carry, 30.4% success rate per rush. Nobody's been running. I mean, you got to rewind back 2.5 months to find the last time a team was able to run the ball successfully on the Packers defense. Now, to be fair, if you look at the Packers' last 8 opponents, it makes a little bit of sense. They haven't seen a ton of dynamic rushing attacks. I mean, you got the Bears, they can't run the ball. 49ers with the offensive line and RB problems they have had. Miami hasn't been able to run the ball this year. You got Detroit. They deserve credit for shutting down Detroit on the ground. Seattle, an average rushing attack. The Saints, they've had their problems as well. Minnesota, Chicago. So, I mean, not that they've played the worst rushing attacks in the NFL, but they haven't exactly seen a slew of dynamic, explosive rushing attacks here. But still, we're talking about 3.36 yards per carry, 30.4% success rate, 71 rushing yards allowed per game over a 7-game span. That cannot be downplayed. I mean, this Packers run defense might be for real. They're also going to be healthier than they've been in the last few weeks. Looks like Quay Walker's going to be back. He missed, I think he missed 2 games. He's been practicing all week. I think he's going to be back. Also, safety Evan Williams has been practicing all week. Looks like he's going to be back as well. So they're actually going to be healthier in this game than they've been in the past few weeks. Sure, this Eagles offensive line is definitely dominant, and we do have to mention that. On the season, they're 20th in adjusted line yards, 6th in run blocking grade, 2nd in yards before contact. But it's not like the Packers defensive front is getting bulldozed here. Teams are having trouble generating push against this defensive front. They're 6th in adjusted line yards, 24th in run defense grade, 3rd in yards before contact. So right now you're probably thinking, all right, cool, Kyle. Green Bay's been playing some good defense against the run, but you don't understand. This is Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. This is a different type of beast. No way do I think the Packers defense is able to stop Saquon Barkley from running the football. And I get why you would think that. But check this out. And this is actually crazy. This entire season, want to know how many games the Eagles have played against top 15 defenses? Top 15. I didn't say top 5. I didn't say top 10. Top 15. So top half defenses. 3. This entire season, they played 3 defenses rated in the top 15 of the NFL. In those games, the Eagles averaged 3.9 yards per carry, under 38% success rate per rush. So the Eagles were struggling to run the ball the only 3 times they saw top 15 defenses. In their other 14 games against bottom 17 defenses, sure, they bulldozed everybody. 5.4 yards per carry, over 189 rushing yards per game. No question the Eagles were dominant against these bad defenses, but this dominant, unstoppable Eagles rushing attack, when they actually saw good defenses, which was a rarity, didn't look that unstoppable. So I know it sounds crazy, and I know a lot of people are probably thinking I'm trying some hot take thing out right here. It's not that at all. I legitimately think the Green Bay defensive front is able to limit the Eagles run game. They're not going to shut it down, of course not, but I really don't think the Eagles are just going to hand the ball off and get 5-6 yards per carry, bulldoze this Packers defensive front like they've been doing to these bad defenses. Nobody has run the ball on the Packers in 2.5-3 months now. Now, what about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles passing attack, though? Are they going to be able to throw the ball on this Packers secondary? Well, right off the bat, we have to give credit to the Green Bay pass rush. Out of nowhere, looking pretty good. And it's weird because they kind of did the same thing last year. If you remember Thanksgiving against Detroit, I mean, Jordan Love, the Packers weren't looking all that great. Then out of nowhere, they had a pass rush that just showed up. They sacked Jared Goff a bunch of times in that game. He threw some picks. And from that moment on, through the playoff run, the Packers had a pass rush. We're kind of seeing a similar pattern here. Weeks 1 through 6, just 28.3% pressure rate, 27th in the NFL. Since week 7, 34% pressure rate, 6th in the NFL. So this Green Bay pass rush has arrived. They have a decent pass rush now. The reason that's so important is we've seen a pretty clear pattern this season with Jalen Hurts, and it's kind of crazy because last year was almost the exact opposite. He was actually excellent under pressure last year. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. It's been the exact opposite this year. I mean, he's 33rd in the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure, 17th in passer rating, 29th in turnover-worthy play rate, 28th in pressure to sack rate. He holds onto the ball, he takes sacks, he puts the ball in harm's way. You put pressure on Jalen Hurts, and he has run into all kinds of problems this season. Also, look at the top right of this graphic, 30th. The Packers are 30th in blitz rate. Green Bay does not blitz a lot. The reason I'm bringing that up, Jalen Hurts is actually a top 10 quarterback in the NFL when blitzed. 6th in pass rating against the blitz, 13th when not blitzed. These splits really aren't that crazy, but look at the turnover-worthy throw rate. 16th when blitzed, 27th when not blitzed. Green Bay almost never blitzes. As far as the coverage matchups here for Jalen Hurts, we know what Green Bay does. They rotate different zone coverages. They're second in zone coverage frequency, a lot of cover 2, a lot of cover 3. Jalen Hurts significantly better against man coverage. In fact, he's second in the NFL in pass rating against man coverage. Significantly worse numbers against zone coverage, although the turnover-worthy throw rate is better against zone coverage, so we can point that out. His numbers against cover 2, not impressive at all. He's 8th in pass rating overall this season, 24th against cover 2, and kind of the same thing for cover 3. He's 17th in pass rating against cover 3 versus 8th overall. So at this point, it's looking like a pretty rough matchup for Jalen Hurts. That being said, there is something I like here. We know what this Green Bay defense does. If you subscribe to this channel, you've heard me say this probably 10 times this year. Green Bay sits back in coverage. They will give you the underneath throws. Well, Jalen Hurts likes those. 46% of his pass attempts this year are short passes. He has a 113 passer rating throwing those short passes. So I kind of like that for Jalen Hurts. Green Bay's going to give him those underneath throws, and Jalen Hurts is happy to take them. So there's something if you're trying to bet Philadelphia. Those throws should be there for him. But in my opinion, that's just not enough for me. I mean, I think this number should be 3. So at 4.5, 5, I think there's definitely value on the Green Bay side. I'm a little confused to why it's 4.5, 5. Maybe I'm missing something, but it's definitely going to be Green Bay for me here. I'm on the Packers. Give me the +5. Next game. Last game of the night, we got Washington on the road in Tampa. Bucs are laying 3 across the board now. Totals at mostly 50.5. Now, let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in pretty heavily on the Washington side. Over 70% of the tickets, over 80% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Washington offense against the Bucs defense. Commanders should definitely have the edge on this side of the ball. Washington finished the season 10th in yards per play, 5th in success rate. Tampa Bay's defense 18th and 23rd. Although we do have to point out that the Bucs have been playing much better defense in the second half of the season. If you remember, they had some injuries to the front seven early on. Since week 12, they're allowing just 17 points per game, 5.4 yards per play, success rate under 45%. They did play some pretty bad offenses during that stretch, but I mean, if you compare the defensive production for Tampa Bay from weeks 12 to 18 to weeks 5 through 10, I mean, weeks 5 through 10, it was looking like the Bucs might have the worst defense in the NFL. They've turned it around in a major way. The Bucs defense has been playing well. Specifically against the run, too, the Bucs have just been locked down up front on their last 9 games. So we're talking about more than half the season here. 3.43 yards per carry allowed, under 69 rushing yards allowed per game, success rate per rush down at 30.9%. So similar to the Green Bay defense we were just talking about, this Bucs defense out of nowhere, second half of the season, one of the best run defenses in the NFL. And look what happens when we change it from the last 9 games to the last 4 games. It gets even crazier. In the last 4 games of the season, the Bucs held opponents to 2.83 yards per carry. 2.83. That's Ohio State versus Purdue shit. 2.83 yards per carry. Under 43 rushing. Under 43? Are you crazy? 42.5 rushing yards allowed per game. Success rate per rush under 25%. So this Bucs defensive front is playing out of this world right now. That being said, got to look at the opponents. I mean, you got the Chargers. They've been struggling to run the ball a little bit. You got the Cowboys. I mean, not really a great rushing attack, although they've been better in the second half of the season. You got the Panthers. You got the Saints. So, yeah, I mean, you have to consider the opponents, but no question, this Bucs defensive front seven is playing out of their minds right now. And from what I'm reading, everyone should be good to go on the Bucs defense. I know they have 4 starters listed as questionable, but all 4 of these guys have been participating in practice. So the Bucs defense should be at full strength here. Now, we do have to point out, just because this Bucs defense is shutting down the Panthers run game, the Saints run game, the Cowboys run game with Rico Dowdle, just because they're playing elite run defense against teams like that, doesn't mean they can completely stop the Washington Commanders rushing attack, because they've been very good. In their last 6 games, 5.5 yards per carry as a team, over 165 rushing yards per game, success rate just over 42%. And I mean, yeah, you got the Cowboys twice in there. That's a terrible run defense. You got the Saints. That's one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. But you know what? You got the Eagles. That's a great defense. You got the Falcons in there. You got the Titans. They're pretty solid defense. So it's not like they play complete scrubs. This Washington rushing attack is definitely going to be a huge test for this Bucs run defense that seems to be unstoppable right now, but they've played a lot of weak rushing attacks. The battle on the line of scrimmage should slightly favor Tampa Bay's defensive front here. Washington's offensive line on the season, 19th in adjusted line yards, 25th in run blocking grade, 9th in yards before contact. The Tampa Bay defensive front, 6th, 20th, and 4th. So the Commanders' offensive line should definitely struggle to generate push. I'm not saying the Bucs are going to shut the Washington run game down. I mean, with Jaden Daniels back there, it's a pretty serious dual threat. He's a crazy athlete. They're definitely going to be able to make some plays on the ground, but this should be a really tough test for him. Like I said, Tampa Bay's defensive front is playing really well right now. Now, what about the matchup for Jaden Daniels? Is he going to be able to throw the ball on this Tampa Bay defense? Well, the Bucs pass defense kind of followed the same pattern as the run defense. Weeks 5 through 10, it was looking terrible. They were allowing over 325 yards per game, 8.6 yards per attempt. Kirk Cousins threw all over this Bucs defense twice in there. But since week 12, it's been significantly better. 6.4 yards per pass attempt allowed, 232.7 passing yards allowed per game, an average opponent passer rating of 88. But again, you do have to question the opponents. I mean, other than week 15 against Justin Herbert, they didn't see any legitimate passing attacks. I mean, I guess Bryce Young, the Panthers 2.0 passing attack isn't terrible, but it's not good. I mean, you got the Giants in there, the Raiders, the Cowboys with Cooper Rush, and Cooper Rush actually played well. That being said, Cooper Rush actually played well twice against Washington as well. Cooper Rush cooked on both these teams. You got Carolina again, you got New Orleans. So yeah, the Bucs pass defense has played way better down the stretch. They've also seen a lot of bad quarterbacks. So when you look at Washington's passing numbers on the year, you'd say this is a huge step up in production for the Bucs defense. I mean, on the season, Washington's 11th in yards per pass attempt, 11th in success rate per dropback, 4th in EPA per dropback. This is a huge step up in competition. Every time Tampa Bay has seen a passing attack rated in the top 12, they have struggled. In those games, they're allowing 24.5 points per game, 6.5 yards per play, 52% success rate. You can see on the right side of this graphic, they've struggled against the pass. In those games against top 12 passing attacks. I will say most of those games were earlier in the season, a while ago, but still, it's concerning. Every time Tampa Bay has seen a passing attack rated in the top 12, they've struggled. Washington is definitely rated in the top 12. That being said, we do have to mention something here. I mean, you look at Washington's passing numbers on the season, they look great. They look like a top 10 passing attack. A lot of that damage was done early in the year. In weeks 1 through 9, they were averaging 8.5 yards per pass attempt as a team, almost 70% success rate per dropback, over 238 passing yards per game, average pass rating over 107. The passing production we've seen from Washington since week 10 hasn't really been close to that. Not that it's been bad. They still have a success rate over 63%, but the yards per attempt down to 6.7, 223 passing yards per game. This Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels offense definitely hasn't been nearly as potent in the second half of the year. And on top of that, this Bucs defense might be a really tough matchup for Jaden Daniels. This is the Todd Bowles defense. We know the blitzes are coming. They're 5th in the NFL in blitz rate. We know that pass rush is coming. Not that Jaden Daniels has struggled under pressure. That's actually not the case at all. He's 5th in the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure, 13th in pass rating, 15th in turnover-worthy play rate. But look at the bottom left of this graphic. 22.3% pressure to sack rate, 33rd in the NFL, and that Bucs pass rush is coming. Washington's offensive line isn't all that great, and like I said, those Todd Bowles blitz packages are coming, and Jaden Daniels has really struggled against the blitz this year. When not blitzed, he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. 7th in completion percentage, 10th in yards per attempt, 9th in passer rating, 4th in turnover-worthy throw rate. When he's blitzed, 20th, 28th, 17th, 21st. So a significant drop-off in production when he's blitzed. And another thing this Tampa Bay defense does a lot of, single high safeties. They're 6th in the NFL in single high safety frequency. That's a concern for Jaden Daniels as well. He's been much better against 2 high safeties. Against single high safeties, he's 16th in completion percentage, 12th in yards per attempt, 22nd in passer rating. He's 5th in passer rating against 2 high safeties. So that's another concern for Jaden Daniels. So on paper, this might be a pretty tough matchup for him. As for the matchup on this side of the ball as a whole, I gotta say I kind of like it for the Bucs defense. I mean, we're talking about a 50-50.5 total here. The market is expecting points, so I mean, I'm not expecting the Bucs defense to shut down Washington's offense at all, but I do think they're able to get off the field. I think they're able to make Jaden Daniels uncomfortable. I think they're able to limit the rushing attack. So yeah, I think the Bucs defense could play pretty well here. Now let's flip it over to the other side of the ball and look at the matchup for Tampa Bay's offense against Washington's defense. And this is where the Bucs should have the significant edge. Tampa Bay actually finished the season 2nd in the NFL in yards per play, 3rd in success rate. The Washington defense 14th and 16th. So the Bucs offense should be in pretty good shape for this one against the Commanders defense. I do want to point out though that Washington has played some better defense as of late. In weeks 1 through 12, I mean 50% success rate, 6.2 yards per play, 23.1 points per game allowed. But since week 13, the numbers look significantly better. 5.6 yards per play, 45% success rate. Points per game is about the same. But the Washington defense has looked better as of late, specifically against the pass too. Since week 13, 6.3 yards per pass attempt allowed, under 208 passing yards per game allowed, an average opponent pass rating of 76.3. So again, the Commanders have played some solid defense as of late. That being said, when it comes to Washington, we need to look right here. And if you're a Commanders fan, I just want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to take away credit from your team. I'm not trying to shit on you guys. I'm not trying to give a hot take. But I do have concerns here. This is going to sound hot take-ish, and I don't mean it to. But if we look at the Washington Commanders body of work, here's the season. We start off the year pretty hot, right? I mean, Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury take the league by storm, going into Baltimore week 6, playing them tough. They lost that game 30-23, but it was a great game. Washington played tough. Then they beat the life out of Carolina in week 7. And at that point, after 7 weeks, the Commanders were sitting at 5-2, and we were all like, yo, this is a dominant offense. This is a good NFC team right here. Since that point, though, how many, and I'm going to be careful how I phrase this, how many good games have we seen the Washington Commanders play? Since week 7, how many good games have we seen the Washington Commanders play? Check this out. So in week 8, you have a home game against Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, one of the worst teams in the NFC. You need a Hail Mary to beat them. So you should have lost that game in there. I mean, you needed a Hail Mary to beat one of the worst teams in the NFC at home. I know Jaden Daniels got banged up in that game. So they needed a Hail Mary to beat the Bears at home. After that, they play a tough game against the Giants. Giants scored at the end. They went for 2 to make it a 3-point game. But still, Giants played them pretty tough. So they play a tough game against one of the worst teams in the NFL, maybe the worst team in the NFL. After that, you have 3 consecutive losses. Loss, loss, loss. After that, you have a comfortable home win against Tennessee, and they jumped out to a 28-0 lead. The Titans fumbled inside their own 25 twice. This was a good game, so I will give them this one. This is a good game for Washington. Tennessee gave them 21 free points immediately. So there's one. After that, you barely beat Spencer Rattler. And I mean, the Saints went for 2. If Spencer Rattler throws that pass, they lose that game to Spencer Rattler. After that, you need a miracle comeback win to beat Kenny Pickett. After that, you need a miracle. Well, I wouldn't say a miracle against the Falcons, but you need overtime to beat Michael Penix in his first career road start. The Atlanta Falcons at home. You need overtime to beat Michael Penix. And then after that, you need a last minute of the game touchdown drive to beat Cooper Rush. Yes, I know Marcus Mariota played the second half of that game, but you know what? Jaden Daniels played the first half, the entire first half. The score was 6-3 Cowboys at halftime. Washington should have lost to Cooper Rush twice. So again, look at their body of work since week 8. You got one comfortable home win against Tennessee. Other than that, not a ton of great football games here. They should have lost to the Bears. The Giants played them tough. I mean, you should have lost to Cooper Rush twice. And I mentioned how the Commanders have been playing better defense against the pass as of late. Since week 13, the numbers look pretty good. Look at the quarterbacks they've seen since week 13. So in week 12, you got Cooper Rush and they lost. So they lost to Cooper Rush. Then you got Will Levis. Then you got Spencer Rattler. Then you got Kenny Pickett. Then you got Michael Penix in his first career road start. And then you got Cooper Rush again. So that's the quarterbacks Washington's been playing, and they needed miracles to win most of those games. Tennessee's the only one where they really won comfortably. They even lost one of them to Cooper Rush. So forgive me if I'm not buying the Washington pass defense numbers for the last 6 games. It's been a while since they've seen a decent quarterback. We're talking about the Bucs here with Baker Mayfield, one of the best overall offenses in the NFL. And by the way, even if you want to take Baker Mayfield out of the equation, I mean, the mismatch between the Bucs offensive line and the Washington defensive front is pretty serious here. I mean, the Bucs are 2nd in adjusted line yards, 16th in run blocking grade, 6th in yards before contact. Washington's defensive front has been struggling to stay on the line of scrimmage all season, 23rd, 29th, 31st. So the Bucs should have no problems running the ball on Washington. Not to mention Tampa Bay tends to run more gap concept blocking schemes, 8th most in the NFL, and they're very good at it. Plays directly into the weakness of the Washington defense. They're actually dead last in yards per carry allowed, 26th in success rate per rush against gap concept blocking schemes. So Tampa Bay should have no problems running the ball in this Washington defense. It's also a good matchup for Baker Mayfield on paper. Washington blitzes a lot. They're 4th in blitz rate. Baker Mayfield, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL when blitzed. He's actually 1st in pass rating in the league when blitzed, 6th in yards per attempt, 2nd in completion percentage, 31st in turnover-worthy throw rate. That's a little concerning. So maybe if you're betting Washington, you're banking on a Baker Mayfield interception, which isn't unreasonable. But in terms of completing passes, I mean, he's one of the best in the NFL when blitzed. If you blitz Baker Mayfield and don't get there, he will kill you. And that's probably what's going to happen here because Washington blitzes a lot and the Bucs offensive line is great. They're actually 1st in the NFL in pressure rate allowed. So Baker Mayfield against the Washington Commanders blitz packages, I like that matchup a lot. Another thing that concerns me here for the Commanders defense is the fact that this game's being played on the road in Tampa. Washington's defense has been so much better at home. At home, 21.2 points allowed per game, 5.4 yards per play, 45.6% success rate. On the road, 51.8% success rate, 6.6 yards per play, 25 points allowed per game. So they've been significantly worse on the road. They're going out to Tampa. They went out to Tampa earlier in the year. The Bucs hung 37 points on them, which is why when it comes to betting this game, I'm going to be on the Bucs here. I actually already bet the Bucs. I got it at 2.5, at -2.5. I also am not mad at a Bucs team total over. Probably going to be at 27.5, somewhere around there. I like that. I think the Bucs are able to score points pretty easily in this game as long as Baker Mayfield doesn't completely shoot himself in the foot, which I will admit is possible. The Bucs should be able to move the ball pretty crisply here. Is Washington able to move the ball and score points back? I'm sure they will be able to make some plays on the offensive side of the ball, but as a whole, this Bucs defense has been playing a lot better. Yes, against questionable competition, which is the same criticism I gave Washington, not as extreme. So I'm sure Washington is able to make some plays, but I think the Bucs are going to score points, and I'm here for it. So give me the Bucs -2.5, Bucs team total over. The bet I actually have open right now is Tampa Bay -2.5. Live show, 11 a.m. Eastern time. It's me, Steve from Just a Bet Outside, Toast and Prop Beaver, same 4 as always. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Only 3 games, so maybe we'll do something fun. We'll do some same game parlays or touchdown scorers or something like that. I'll think of something. We'll do something fun, though, for it. I'll think of something. So yeah, if you're able to make it, we'd love to see you there. If you want to see all the bets I currently have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. Let's have ourselves a good one. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.